God bless you all for coming out tonight. A little bit of a quandary when the clock's going from the wall and the watch on me. Looking forward to the evening and what TJ will share with us from Columbia. And I really wish we had a 2-hour service tonight because I think we should hear from Claire and Ruth as well. Hopefully we do sometime. All right, in your Christian hymnals, number 380. And this word of explanation yet. Many of my favorite hymns are invitation, evangelistic type. It's just a bit of a problem to narrow it down to only 3 here. The first one is number 380, Pass Me Not, O Gentle Savior. And if I happen to be, if I know I'm off pitch, I'll just shut it down and let somebody else start it from there. I appreciate you all being out. It seemed like the crowds of this morning didn't realize they'd be welcome tonight as well. Number 380. Pass me not, O gentle Savior, hear my humble cry. While others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Savior, Savior, hear my humble cry. While others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Let me at the throne of mercy find a sweet relief, kneeling there in deep contrition, help my unbelief. Savior, Savior, hear my humble cry. While others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Trusting only in thy merit, would I seek thy face. Heal my wounded, broken spirit. Save me by thy grace. Savior, Savior, hear my humble cry. While others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Thou, the spring of all my comfort, more than life for me. Whom have I on earth beside thee? Whom in heaven but thee? Savior, Savior, hear my humble cry. While others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Number 202. Number 202. The 99 within the fold are
go and bring it back tonight.
Go search it
out and bring it home. No more in darkness let it roam. You'll find it there in dreadful plight. Oh, go and bring it back tonight.
Number 300. Number 300. Out of my bondage, sorrow and night, Jesus I come, Jesus I come, into thy freedom, gladness and light. Jesus I come to thee, out of my sickness into thy health, out of my want and into thy wealth, out of my sin and into thyself. Jesus, I come to thee. Out of my shameful failure and loss, Jesus, I come, Jesus, I come, into thy glorious gain of thy cross. Jesus, I come to thee. Out of her sorrows into thy balm, out of thy storm and into thy calm, out of distress to jubilant song. Jesus, I come to thee. Out of unrest and arrogant pride, Jesus, I come, Jesus, I come, into thy blessed will to abide. Jesus, I come to thee, out of myself to dwell in thy love, out of this air to raptures above, outward foray on wings like a dove. Jesus, I come to thee, out of the fear and dread of the tomb. Jesus, I come, Jesus, I come, into the joy and light of thy home. Jesus, I come to thee, out of the depths of ruin untold, into the peace of thy sheltering home. Ever thy glorious face to behold. Jesus, I come to thee.
Good evening, everyone. For devotions this evening, my thoughts went to a podcast that I heard from Anabaptist Perspectives. I was listening to it earlier this week, and the podcast was on the subject of information, the true and false, and how we process it. And it was an interesting perspective. I forget who exactly the speaker was, but he pointed out that nowadays there is no shortage of information. We have all the information that we need. We have Google at our fingertips, and we have been brought up in this setting, and there is no shortage of information. When we sin or make mistakes, it is usually not because of lack of information. It's not because we didn't know better. And not only when we are presented with information do we need to decide for ourselves whether it's true or false, we also are responsible for how we react, how that information that we have received affects our decisions. And an interesting example that was brought up was a religious leader back in 2010, I believe it was, wrote a letter to the American people. And it was actually a pretty long letter. I did not read the whole thing. I just skimmed over it. But I agreed with some of the points that he made. He was really calling out America in general for the immorality and debauchery that was just rampant within its borders. And he specifically pointed out the corruption in the government, in the ruling powers. And this man acted on the observations that he made. The man's name was Osama bin Laden, and he was one of the men behind the terrorist attacks on September of 2001. I do not agree with his reaction to those observations, however true they may have been, but that was just an extreme example of a bad reaction to truth. A good reaction to truth is found in Acts 6. I'll read the first 3 verses. In those days, when the number of the disciples were multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews, because their widows were neglected in the daily ministration. Then the 12 called the multitude of the disciples unto them, and said, It is not reason that we should leave the word of God and serve tables. Wherefore, brethren, look ye out among you 7 men of honest report, full of the Holy Ghost and wisdom, whom we may appoint over this business. I see this as a good response to truth. The situation came up. The Grecians, their widows were not being cared for. And that complaint, that issue was told to the 12 apostles, and they didn't just overreact and apologize and, oh yeah, we'll work on that right away. They seemed to have sat down and said, what's the correct response to this? Should we leave our ministry to serve these widows? And they evidently decided that that was not where the Spirit was leading and not what would be the best thing to do. But they did agree that the problem was a serious one and needed to be dealt with, so they told the Grecians to appoint 7 men to fulfill that role. And in chapter 6, it goes on to talk of one of those 7 men, of Stephen, how he was arrested and then later stoned. But another example that came to mind was the Bereans, how they received, I believe it was Paul's teaching, with an open mind, but they didn't just take it at face value. They didn't just say, well, he looks like a reputable man. He is very passionate about what he's saying, so he must be telling us the truth. They look for themselves, and Paul complimented them for that. And that was significant to me, because it may have been easy for Paul to say, well, look, like, ask other people. I'm trustworthy. I'm telling you the truth here. But he complimented on their search for the truth and not just blind faith in another human. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Father, think that we can gather like this. Pray that you would be with us the rest of the night, be with TJ especially as he presents this time at Edge. I pray that you would give him words to speak, and I pray that we would be open and listening. Amen.
I want to thank everybody for taking their part and looking forward to TJ's presentation. The schedule for next Sunday, just for those that have part, Kyle has his Forster and devotions on the chart is Tyler, but he obviously just had it, so it's Ben Hershey. Is who I put down. The children's class by Mark and the topic by Lindsay. And then also by way of information, December 12th, we're planning on having Christmas caroling here. I need to talk to some other people. If you have any input, you can find me, because I never did it before, and so I'm not sure what the normal is or the acceptable, so looking for input for that. So with that, I'll turn the time over to you.
Can we move this pulpit? Sure. Just like this. Really good to be back. I do have to make some disclaimers. What Tyler just shared was actually pretty timely. He was talking about reacting to truth, reacting in a positive way, and I've made some mistakes. I accepted this a little quickly. I'm still a little tired and trying to process things. I really hope I can share well and you guys can understand me. I'd be happy to talk about anything that I share tonight and have a one-on-one conversation. This is something I enjoy doing, sharing in front of all of you guys. It's not really where my strengths are. I would rather be possibly on top of a mountain or something like that, talking one-on-one. So, if you know any mountains and you want to talk, let's go. That being said, yeah, I'm really excited to be back and ready to be a part of the church here and be a part of the young guys and stuff like that. It will take me a little bit, just like it took me a little bit when I was down there, to adjust to a new life down there. Yeah. I want to, tonight, just a few of the goals for tonight. I want to share some of the stuff we did as a team, what our goals were, some of the the things we were doing, some of the values of the mission I was with, and hopefully I want to share some of God's heart that I didn't really hear about until I was with this mission. And it's not the mission specifically, it's something more about God's heart. I had heard for the first time and kind of blew me away. just hearing that there's a part of God's heart that he wants to see people have access to a relationship with him. I want to talk about unreached people groups later tonight, just so we can hear about people who haven't heard about Jesus and who don't have access to him, because that's a big part of it, is a lot of people don't actually have access to the materials that we have. Obviously, we're pretty blessed. One quick question I was going to do right away, but I forgot. Who here, I'd like to see a raise of hands, like who here has been overseas outside of the United States for like over a month? It's a lot more than I thought. As I was leaving, I was made aware like there's actually a lot of us who have spent considerable time in Asia, in Latin countries, and Haiti, places like that, and it's really encouraging to hear that, and I'd really like to hear some of your experiences too later, and hear about Claire's as soon as they have time for that. Yeah, so let's just start off with prayer real quick. Dear God, thank you so much for a wonderful church like Northwoods, and the caring ministry we have, and people that we are that pursue God and pursue you. Dear God, I just pray that tonight I can share, and I can share honestly about the good and the bad, and about you. Pray that we can all come closer to you through this, and that we can truly see your heart for unreached people. In your name, amen. Yeah. So, what did I do? So EDGE is the program, name of the program I went on. It's under GTO, Global Tribes Outreach. The program is basically designed to reach out to unreached people groups, like I talked a little bit about. They want to train you in sharing the gospel to new groups, which is a lot harder than it sounds. Contextualizing the gospel, making it clear to them when I come from a place that has warm houses and we live in the cold, and I go to a place where they live in straw houses and live on beaches or something like that, where the setting is different, the culture is different. How do we accurately portray the gospel in its simplest terms so that people can understand it and come to Christ, or have that opportunity? Because people around the world do not have that. That is one of the goals of the EDGE program. Another one is just living as a team. You go in teams of 2 to 6 people. My team was actually just 2 people, me and my other EDGE bro. So you live as a team, you do everything together as a team, you travel as a team, you eat as a team. I mean, life was team for 6 months, and it was the best thing and it was the worst thing. It was where we grew, it was where we came up short sometimes, but it's ultimately where we saw God a lot too. There is such a big difference in how God worked in us, me and my EDGE bro, over the last 6 months. How he showed us our weaknesses and showed us how he wants us to step up. And it was one of my favorite parts of EDGE, was just being part of a team where you could fail, you could give it your all, you could go out there and you could try to be a friend to someone new in a new area, and ultimately maybe you'd mess up. But then your bro would be there and he would pick you up. He would say, all right, you did mess up in this area, and or maybe you hurt me in this area too, but we're gonna get up from this, and we're gonna analyze this. We're gonna look for the truth in here, and we're gonna look for the truth of who you are. It was a stretching experience for me. I hope I can continue to learn from it. It's part of the processing, as what Tyler was talking about tonight, with analyzing truth and reacting positively to it, like a person who follows Christ should. While we were down there, we would do trips. We would go out. Our goal is to, like I said, spread the gospel to unreached peoples. So we would go out to missions, sharing any way we could. Sometimes we would do physical things for them, like we would build stuff. We built cabinets, bridges, and several other big things. There's lots of cool opportunities in that area. But a lot more than that, we built a lot of relationships. We met a lot of people, and we shared with them. We tried to basically equip the missionaries we did meet to share with their people that they are part of already. Because as a young 20-year-old guy from Wisconsin, I don't have a lot in common with someone from the jungle in Colombia. There's not a lot we can bond over, but besides that, their life is a lot different. And so if I can encourage and inspire someone who's already there as a missionary, how much farther can they go to spread the gospel than I can? That was one of our goals, was to inspire those people to go to people that they share a lot with. That way they can accurately give the gospel to them. And we don't get hung up on things that are just cultural differences, like me wanting to go snowboarding and them wanting to go swimming in the Amazon or something like that. So that was what we did on our trips. We built a lot of relationships, and we would sing, we would preach, we would do whatever. Our ultimate goal was just to follow Jesus in these moments, because we came up short a lot. We really did, just like we do in normal life and just like I have before. But when we can come to God and we can say, God, this is all we have, this is all we can bring to the table, but we know you have a heart for these people and you're going to reach out to them, so we want you to come in for us. That's when we saw some pretty cool things happen. It was kind of cool to hear Todd talk about miracles this morning. Yeah, miracles are dope. We had things happen to us that, honestly, after seeing them, I would really like to brag about them, but honestly, it just puts me in a really bad light, because it was us making mistakes or us coming up short, and then God's like, hey, I got you guys. I'm here for you. Not because you're awesome, but because I have a heart for you, and I have a heart for these people that you're going to. Or he just cared for us in specific ways. One time, I can remember specifically having a bad day. A bad day. And looking around for any sort of support and just not feeling it. Feeling quite alone, quite scared, and kind of angry that I had made this decision to go somewhere and make myself uncomfortable. It didn't make sense to me why I had chosen to do this. And I remember looking around for people or anything to just have some support from. And I actually got a message from someone around here. And I thought that's cool. They were thinking of me, and I was like, all right, I'm glad someone's thinking of me. That's pretty cool. And I kind of went on with my day. It didn't really change anything. And then our contact at the time, a lady who didn't actually know me, she knew my name, and that was about it. She came over to me, and we were going to eat lunch. We'd all sat down. She's sitting across from me, and gets kind of quiet. We're about to lead out in prayer. All of a sudden, she stops everybody, and this is like a big table of people. We had all just met each other and stuff. We were going to be doing missions for about a week or two. And she looks at me, in front of everybody. She says, TJ, I just feel like I really need to tell you something right now. The season that you're in right now, this is a season that God's giving you, but it's not going to last forever. It's just a season that God wants you in, and you should enjoy it while you have it, but you shouldn't look at it as the end, or you shouldn't look at it as the hardest thing that I'll give you. And I was kind of disappointed at first, because I didn't like being called out in front of everybody. But I realized later, she was trying to speak life into me. She was trying to encourage me there. And God was using her, and God wanted to use me too. I was just being the weak link there, and I was looking inwardly. And that's just a small miracle I'd like to praise God for right now, that He called me to something higher there. I'm going to share some pictures tonight. Not a lot, just because there's a lot to tell about them, so I'll just keep it to a few tonight. And feel free to ask questions during these pictures too. If you see something maybe you'd like to understand, or even anything I've said so far, that would be awesome. Could we turn off some of the lights? Make it a little darker.
How long was your training time before you went out?
It's a good question. So like training is an awesome thing, but it's like so much more awesome when you can actually do it and find out as it happens. So, what?
So it was like the whole time.
Oh, see, always being trained. I like that. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. We'll get into some pictures. There'll be just some like random scenery pictures of Colombia or other places thrown in. Colombia is really a beautiful country, if any of you would like to travel there sometime. Really friendly people, and a really beautiful country. Here is our first trip. This is a trip to Ecuador. Here, our goal was to work with our contacts and just do services at church where we would invite people from the community in. We would go to church members' houses who had actually left the church, and we'd hang out with them. We'd be friends with them, and we would try to encourage them to come back. Yeah, that was good to have to like be with people and just live life with them and show them Christ in different ways. They were really hospitable to us here. They gave us a lot of good fruits, and yeah. But like I said, there was a lot of people who had left this church that we were a part of, and there was actually, this is my first encounter with what I would call spiritual darkness, and this is a realm I'm really not qualified to talk about, but I will say my little experience with it. We were told in our training that like there is such a thing as spiritual darkness. There is places where Satan has come in and he has a stronghold there, and where God is not present. And our goal is as a team to for lack of better wording, bring God's presence into those places. And in this place, we struggled with spiritual darkness in a way that it felt like the people were hospitable, but they didn't want to like connect with us. And it felt like our team too was struggling just as in feeling a weight. I don't know how to describe it, and I'd be interested to hear some of your thoughts on spiritual darkness. But I believe that there is a presence that God gives to His people and His church, and that presence is something that we can't take for granted. We should be thankful that God gives that. I heard somewhere recently, maybe it was in a sermon I watched from our church here, about the time that Daniel was praying to God, and God didn't come to him for a while because he was battling the Prince of Persia. I'd have to look up the direct reference for that, but they mention it in the Bible a couple times that there are. Yeah, on this trip, they were super hospitable people, contacts. Those are plantains that we're holding, and they made everything out of them. We had delicious cakes, lasagna, and other foods I can't remember at the moment. They would put them into little chips that were super good, and yeah, they went above and beyond to provide for us. But at the same time, this is a place in the world where there are a lot poorer communities too. They didn't have a lot. This was still in Ecuador, but back in the city where we were teaching English, right in the middle of the street. That was a good experience to just hang out with the kids and like see how big of a thing English is for people to learn. Like they really want to. I think it's awesome. All right, this is any questions on Ecuador? Feel free to voice them, because this is our next trip. This is Paraguay. We went to a mission associated with the beaches down there. There we were building shells for them. So we were working and going into the community and doing stuff like prayer walking and visiting people and handing out food and clothes, because it gets cold there and there's not the greatest housing there. This was a good trip just to live life with the people. We had a great time with this contact, especially. He was a farmer, and we would go around from farm to farm just like helping out other people, and we were chopping down sugar cane one day and loading it into the back of it. I think I have a picture of the ox cart. There it is. We were chopping down sugar cane one day and loading it into an ox cart with him. It was a good time with that guy, and just like seeing the way they did life was super cool. Yeah, I can't remember the name of it right now. It was how many people? 50 to 60. Yeah. It was part of a clinic they had right there too. This is on to our next trip. This is Brazil. There is some big cities in Brazil. Really, really big cities. This is actually just a smaller city outside of Sao Paulo. And they called it a small little town compared to the big city. A small town of about 3 million people. For comparison, Minneapolis is like 400,000 in the actual city, and like maybe 2 or 3 million in the whole surrounding area. This is a really big city. There, we were working with these people doing drug rehab. We would go to different drug rehabs. We would share our testimony. We would hang out with the guys and basically assist the missionaries as they worked around. By the way, we had pretty good translators on most of our trips, so that was really cool. We could start up a conversation with most people, and that's another thing. Most people actually want to talk to you. They'll go out of their way till you can have a conversation on Google Translate if you don't have a translator. People really like to talk to gringos. It's a great opportunity to like share, because they want to talk to you already. So if you have that, why not use it to like talk about Jesus, talk about their lives? It's a great opportunity. And in Brazil, Brazil really is, the people there are some of the loudest and most excitable people I've ever met. They, it was so cool to see them, to interact with them. They wanted to hang out so much. They thought if they spoke Portuguese just a little bit louder and like leaned in a little bit more, you would understand it, which we didn't. But we knew that they really wanted, that had some real good friends when they did that, so that was really cool. Our favorite part of this whole trip was that we got to stay at one for a weekend. We got to stay with the guys and do life with them. We did dominoes and I actually worked out with some of the guys in that little shack down there. That was a great memory. And right there, we're getting fruits and vegetables out of the back of that truck to slice up for dinner. And yeah, it was just a good time. Like I said, they really loved talking and just talking about Jesus too. I was really surprised how much these guys loved Jesus. They were fired up. First of all, they're super excitable, and they're like excited about life. But they had just come out of some of the worst areas of the world. Hearing their stories, I was amazed for the first one, but after a while, like it sounded like they all had experienced some sort of pain that happened to them, and then they carried that on for the next couple years or even many years of their life. Some of them were older, most of them were younger. But it was incredible to hear then about how this drug rehab, how they had brought them back to Christ, and how they had shown them Christ's love, and shown them that he actually calls them to more. He calls them to be men of God, not just, he calls them to like address some of the horrible things that have happened to these guys, but then to also step away from that. This mission was really cool as well, because they set up right in a really rough neighborhood at the time, and they just decided to start it there because there was a need there, and they felt called there. They weren't they realized that it was dangerous, but they also realized that God was calling to them to that, so they were ready for it. They were sure that because it was what God wanted them to do, they were going to do it. And now they have a lot of guys attending, and a lot of guys who will come back and help the next group go through their courses and live life with them, just to be a good influence. Yes and no. Spanish was pretty much universal except for Brazil. Obviously, they speak Portuguese there, which Spanish speakers can speak to Portuguese people, and Portuguese people will understand, but Spanish speakers don't understand Portuguese. So it's kind of a one-sided conversation. As far as Spanish goes, there's still a little bit of differences between like Paraguay and Colombia. They speak a little bit differently. So they can communicate, but it takes a little bit of work. But yeah, Spanish, it's actually a cool opportunity, because there's so many countries that speak Spanish. You can go into Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, and Ecuador, and Venezuela, and they all speak Spanish. There may be like cultural differences and stuff like that, but you can definitely get around with your Spanish. That wrapped up Brazil, and then we go on to the Colombian Amazon. This is in Leticia, kind of the bottom part of Colombia. This is a good trip to. We were there for just a little bit, but to see more dedicated missionaries who were not distracted by the difficulties. They were just more fired up about like telling their communities about God. This is where I started to see that it wasn't so much the tough people that became these missionaries, but just the people who were willing to follow God. As I was like talking with some of these guys about like the difficulties and stuff of like living in the Amazon and in the jungle, they kind of looked at me like I was raining on their parade or something like that. And they started telling me about how it wasn't about that, but it was about them following God's commandment to go and teach others. And it kind of, I still need to be put in my place, but it could put me in my place that one time to hear them talk about following God like that, not because they were tough and they could handle it, but because God could handle it and they were going to trust Him. It's really cool we rebuilt that bridge so that they could have a revival meetings the next weekend. That was really fun to do that with them. there's the bridge rebuilt. You can see now they can walk across that muddy area, and they were hoping to have a couple hundred people come back there the next week. This is still in Colombia, but this is a different time when we were going around to different villages and sharing the Jesus film and preaching at the same time. This was a good trip because we were actually going and talking to a lot of different people. We'd have big groups come out like this. This was an apartment building we showed the Jesus film at, and this is right at the beginning, and we ended up having a lot of people come out to this movie later on that night, and it got kind of chaotic in the middle, but then at the end, everyone calmed down to listen to us share our testimonies and share the gospel, and it was really a good experience to have that, and we would do it in we'd do it in a couple different villages as well. There was one experience especially on this trip where we were with our contact and we had to show the film in the day because we shouldn't be there at night. So we had to show it in the day, and there's a lot of problems with that because the screen is white and the sun will shine right through it and you won't be able to actually see the movie, the Jesus film. And so we had some extra time while we were setting this up because there are a few problems. And everybody was all the people were just happy to be there and like happy to listen to us. And so we were able to use that, and one of us was like setting things up, and the other one was able to preach and share his testimony for a pretty long time, and all the watchers were fine with it. They listened really attentively and were one of our most attentive and responsive crowds too. And I was really just blown away how it was something that we thought was going to be a problem when we were setting things up. Like, oh, we can't get everything set up right. We can't get our movie screen at the right place. We can't find a good spot for that. And what if like someone doesn't like what we're doing and like kicks us out? Like this is just not good. And then God just like actually gave us a way to like share more than we thought we could, and the people actually responded. It was a cool moment that God is actually working out His plans in those times when we're most scared and we're most unsure. This is back to another trip. We went to Panama, and this trip we were actually going to be on an island doing some work for a mission that was already there. We were going to be setting things up with them, but this was a harder trip for me. Yeah. Honestly, a hard thing for me to do is to like listen to God. Like if we have a mission, I feel like we can stick with that. We can go with that and we can do that. But we got to this place and we started working with our contact, and we started actually feeling like this wasn't really where we were supposed to be. We just didn't have stuff to do that like lined up with our goals. And we started praying about it, and we decided that this just wasn't it for us. So we ended up leaving this place and going to the city to hand out food to homeless people. That was kind of hard for me to leave a place I kind of liked, but we didn't have a lot to do, to go to a place that was harder for me, but ultimately a place that like matched up with our goals to like share with people and to show Christ's love to them. But we ended up doing it, and I'm glad we did. I'm glad my teammate pushed for it, because ultimately I feel better about the opportunities we got there in the city than we did out in the jungle that time. But that kind of just showed me that it's not always about like the maybe the hardest places, but maybe just where God wants us. Because it's not what we do, it's following God that we're actually striving to do when we do these things. When we like show love to our neighbors, we're not doing it for a stat sheet. We're doing it because God called us to when he called us to follow him. This is one of our last trips to northern Colombia, near the Caribbean. It was a pretty good trip. We got to see a really cool village out in the middle of kind of a Chippewa-flowage type deal. And it was a village built up on stilts in these little island areas. And we got to share there. We handed out a lot of food and clothes and stuff, and then we would share with the community after that. That whole green building right there is full of people right now. You can't really see it. This is probably one of the trips that will stick with me the most. I think about it a lot because of some of the stories we heard about some of the influence that the cartels have had over these specific villages, and just the way that the Christians in these villages could be pretty righteously angry at what cartels have done to their families and things like that. But they chose to keep living in love, and that meant for them like to keep living where they were, and to keep reaching out to their community, even though it wasn't actually the safest place for them to be, but it was where they were called to be, and it was what they kept doing. And that's something that'll stick with me for a while, is the people in these villages and just the unfairness of them having to go through more pain than we have experienced, and yet they still choose to follow God, and they still try to be an outreach to these people. Something I'm still sorting through, the different paths that God calls us to walk. This picture is taken in Peru. All those tents you see are full of parents either waiting to get their kids into hospital or waiting for their kids to come out of hospital. And they've been waiting there for weeks to months, most of them. There was probably upwards of 20 tents filled with a couple people each tent, sometimes full families of 5 or 6. And sometimes the parents would be split up. One of them would go to the city while the other... They were usually people that had come from far away and come to Peru, come to the capital to get attention for their kids. And it was really something for our team to see that and to try and just bless the people where we could. We handed out materials, and then we did a program for them where we sang, we did skits, we did testimonies, and some preaching, sharing the gospel and stuff. I was really impressed by these parents who had come really far. For some comparison, I did a little check to see how big Peru is and how far some people had to come. Peru, if you actually adjust it for the Mercator projection, like it's on maps, it actually looks smaller than it is. If you adjust it a little bit, it's actually long enough that it'll stretch from the top of Minnesota down to the Gulf of Mexico. And it's about as wide as 2 states or so. So it's a really big country. And these parents will travel pretty much from the outer reaches to get their kids to into hospital. And it was really powerful to see them lay down everything they had just to get some attention for their kids to hopefully help them. There we handed out materials, and then we went to another place in Peru where we were planting trees in this area, but ultimately we ended up sharing a lot with the community. We'd go into homes, and we would do programs for people. We'd just hang out with people sometimes too. Sometimes the best witness for us was just to be with people and to do stuff with them, eat with them, to live with them. And again, this family especially was super friendly. That grandma, we were there for maybe a couple minutes one day, and she wanted to go out and kill us a chicken so we could have something to eat for supper. They really wanted to care for us, and I was really, really impressed by that, how they were willing to lay everything down just for a few people who came through. Okay, that's pretty much all the pictures I'll have for tonight. Yeah, like I said, if you have more questions or you want to see more sometime and would love to hear more about it, there's a lot more stories. It's a lot harder for me to actually share them up here. But I would love to talk about them sometime. Also, I want to do maybe a little weird thing and thank God for COVID real quick. Because if we wouldn't have had COVID, and then the people who lead GTO, they wouldn't have taken us to South America. I don't know what all transpired, but basically what happened is they were in Asia, and that was where their heart was. But they'd always kind of wanted to start something in South America. And as soon as COVID hit, they got sent home from Asia, and it was really tough by the sounds of it. I don't think I'll be able to understand how tough it was for them to get sent home from some of the dreams and the missions they had over there. But they decided to keep going with another dream, which was to start up the program Edge and Ultra and Charge ultimately in South America. And yeah, they ended up getting it done, even though it was super difficult for them. They got down there right before we came down for our training, so our leaders and the staff were setting up shop pretty much as we pulled into town. And yeah, I just want to say that like COVID's not the greatest thing in the world, but like some good came from it and some experiences that I'm really thankful for. And I don't think I'll ever be able to understand all of it until we get to go home and we get some questions answered. But we get to go to heaven and hear what God was actually working on. But yeah, I just want to put that out there. And now I want to talk a little bit before I wrap up about UPGs. It's something I hadn't really heard about or heard talked about before I left. And it's something that we talked a lot about on Edge and Ultra because that was our main goal. Our main goal is to end up going to places that haven't heard or don't have access to the gospel, don't have access to knowing that Jesus came to earth and he died and rose again so that he can live in our hearts. I didn't really know if it's talked about much because I hadn't been listening for it before I went. So I guess I was just going to share a little bit about the things I've heard, the things I've read, and some of the information about UPGs and UPGs is unreached people groups. People groups like Hindus who haven't heard about Jesus, and people groups like Muslims who maybe some of them have access to the Bible, but it's extremely discouraged to the point of persecution for them to go pursuing God. And there's also groups like in South America, such as tribes that have actually never been contacted, or maybe they've been contacted but they haven't been shown the gospel. So they don't have access to the Bible, they don't have access to a Christian who speaks their language. There's a lot of obstacles for them. So that's basically unreached people groups, is a UPG who has never heard about Jesus. Just a few questions, actually. How many, there's about 7 billion to 8 billion people in the world right now. How many people do you think are classified as unreached people? Just any number. 4 million? 4 billion? Pretty close. It's about 3 billion right now. That's people who cannot access God, or cannot access the gospel story right now. That's 3 billion of 7 to 8 billion. That's pretty incredible. For context, there's about 3 billion statistically professing Christians. The amount of Christians you want to think about, like, who are actually living and pursuing Christ, we don't know that number, but there's about 3 billion professing Christians. And there's another group then who has heard about Jesus and has access to him, like people who live around here, they live in Europe, they live other places, who have heard about Jesus, know about him, but have actually rejected him or decided not to follow him. But the 2.9 billion unreached people, they are divided up into other groups too. Yeah, just real quick, they're divided up into tribal groups. These would be a lot of the unreached people in South America generally. 161 million of them. And then Hindu groups, which would be about 860 million people. And then there's unreligious groups, which would be like maybe people, atheists, or someone who isn't following any religion, and is in the world. They're not in like some distant tribe. They're living around, but they just don't have access to him yet. Maybe in places like China. There would be about 121 million unreligious, and then this is one that really surprised me, is there would be 1.3 billion Muslim people who have no access to the gospel, and then there'd be about 275 million unreached Buddhists as well. And that would be most of the unreached people's kind of where they come from and what they're living right now. And there's also the ways of determining like where these people are. A lot of them would be in what's called the 1040 window, which is basically all the northern part of Africa through the Middle East, like all those Muslim countries as Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, those places, and through Afghanistan, all the way over to Asia, where there's countries like Thailand, India. India would be a lot of Hindus that have never heard about Jesus. And that's kind of where a lot of them, 97% of the unreached people groups would be in that 1040 window, actually. So there's not as many living in South America where we were, but there's still millions, but there's billions over in the 1040 window. And another stat about unreached people groups is that 90% of missionaries go to places that are already evangelized. They are already reached. That doesn't mean they have, they're not full of churches and professing Christians. That just means they already have access to the gospel, and they already have access to Christians and missionaries living there. 90% of missionaries go to those places that already have the gospel. And one more thing I want to say. Yeah, just a few more points and facts about unreached people groups. The ratio of unbelievers, they were generating trying to figure out how, what the ratio was at the beginning of the gospel and what the ratio is now of Christians to unbelievers. So the ratio of Christians to unbelievers at the time of 100 AD would have been 360 to 1, 360 unbelievers to 1 Christian. And today, 1 out of every 14 people are unreached. That's because up until now we have been spreading the gospel, and it has been preached, and it has been accepted, and then it has been given to others in the surrounding communities. It has been, evangelical Christianity is the fastest growing religious movement in the world. And there are actually more evangelical Christians in Africa than all of North America and Europe combined, which is an amazing statistic to hear. I had to process that one for a little bit. Another thing about people having access to the Bible is that more than 30% of the world's 6,900 languages need a written translation of the Bible. A lot of the tribes that are unreached yet still wouldn't have access. Like 30% would still not have access to a Bible in their own language. And there's something that kind of, I guess, convicted me as I thought about why some people maybe aren't going to unreached peoples, because they are hard. There's a lot of obstacles to get there. But we must never disregard the power of prayer and praying for these people to go there. There's a verse in Luke 10:2 where Jesus is talking about the harvest being plentiful, but the laborers being few. That's a verse I've heard a lot of before. And I didn't hear the end of the verse for a really long time until just recently I started to understand it a little bit. It says, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers in his harvest." We must never disregard the power of this prayer or its need to be continually prayed. One could argue that so few have gone to the unreached because so few have obeyed Jesus' commandment to pray for laborers. I'm partially scared to pray for laborers because what if that means someone I know and love to hang out with has to go and become a laborer? Or what if I have to go? I'm scared to do it because of that, because of God's will being done. But God's calling us to pray. He says right there, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. So he's asking us to take the step. He's not asking us to sell everything right now. I would hope we can all go home and have a night's sleep. But I would hope we also can look up and say, God is calling us to obey here, and he's calling us to pray for laborers to go out into his harvest. I found that really powerful, that God wants us to be a part of it, whether we're going or whether we're not. He wants us to pray, and he wants us to be part of his will there. And that's just been some things that have been powerful to me to learn and to think about more, and to possibly dive into learning more about unreached peoples. I think it's a good thing for us to know, even if I choose to live here, or even if I choose to live in Minnesota or anywhere else, or in Colombia. It's important to know that God has a will for and has a heart for unreached peoples. It's a verse in Revelation I would want to read. Right after the verse in Luke 2, Matthew 24:14. Jesus is on the Mount of Olives talking to his disciples privately, and he says, "And the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come." And then, if we skip ahead to Revelation 7:9, John says, "After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, stood standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands." A great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues. I think that's pretty cool that God gave us the beginning and the end, and he's letting us fill in the middle. He says right in the beginning, he says back when he's on earth, that when every tongue, when every nation hears about the gospel, then I will come back. And then he says right here in the end that I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands. He gave us the beginning and the end. He wants us to fill in the middle, and he wants us to be a part of that somehow. I think that's pretty cool, and I'm really interested to see how he does it, and how we can look back once we get to heaven and say, he was actually using Claire here in his trip to Mexico. He got to have this interaction with someone who then kept on going, and they ended up sharing the gospel with someone new. I'm looking forward to that day at a banquet with Jesus, when we can hear all about what he's been working on. Thank you very much for listening tonight, and like I said, I would love to talk more about stuff we've done on Edge, and the time I had. I'm really excited to be back too. It's really good to see everyone again and see the people who are encouraging me in this, and really excited to be here again. Let's end with prayer tonight, and then, first, if we could have the song group come up and we'll sing. One song that just kind of, I hope, gets us fired up to go home and to see God and to have a relationship restored with him. Yeah, if everyone could come up who's singing in that group.